G'day Internet, welcome back to another video. So if you remember a while back, I managed to get my grubby little hands on an early version of BennVenn's LCD replacement for the Atari Lynx 2. This guy right here. Well, Ben has been busy and he now has a screen for the original Lynx 1. Now, I know a lot of people prefer the Lynx 2, a lot of people consider it a better machine, but the Lynx 1 is actually the machine that I had as a kid, so it's always going to have a special place in my heart. So with that out of the way, let's take a look. Right, future Jason jumping quickly in here before we get going. In the end, it was a success, just foreshadowing there. But what you're about to watch is a bit kind of cut up. I had a lot of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. There was a bunch of reasons behind that. Ben simply, this is so new that Ben hasn't got all the documentation together yet for the latest production version of this screen. The documentation that he does have, I kind of just blasted through and went, yep, got it, 2 thumbs up. No, I didn't. So what I've pieced together is exactly the way you would install one of these. Be forewarned though that there is a lot of very fiddly solder coming towards you, and as it currently stands, maybe not for the faint-hearted. But let's get going anyway. Right, to get started, what are you going to need? Well, you're going to need a Lynx 1, some solder. I would suggest some solder wick will probably be useful. Wire, I'm using the really thin, what's sometimes called mod wire or wire wrapping wire. Obviously the kit from Ben. What else? Some flush cutters will probably be useful. A screwdriver and my soldering iron. And if you're a YouTuber doing this for the first time, a certain level of stress just to keep you on your toes. So step number 1 is to disassemble the Lynx. Now when you take this apart, the 2 shorter screws are this side and the 2 longer screws are this side. Note to future self. Right, is there a game in here? There is. Ms. Pac-Man. Good game, by the way. I usually remove the door. And now, very carefully, this should come apart. And there's the front cover and all the buttons that I decide to go for a walk. And the rest of the buttons, we can put that as just over there. Next, let's remove this. There's the back cover. Then we have the battery shell. And if we lay this down, simply to make life easier, we are going to desolder the wires to the battery. And we can put that to one side as well. Okay, next step are the 4 screws here, 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 and here. Okay, next. This should be free. So before we do that, there is this little ribbon cable here, which needs removing. Don't just tear at it. Hit it with some heat. You'll also find that it's sometimes double-sided sticky taped down. So that is that removed. We also have these 2 spots here which are soldered in place. So with something sharp like a craft knife or a small flathead screwdriver, get underneath, heat it up and lift it. Do that on both sides. And that should free that up. Right, next to these 4 rubber grommets, now you should be able to just kind of pop them out the sides, like that. And now the whole screen should fold out, and it does. We can remove this bit of plastic, and I don't think we actually need these rubber grommets, so they can go. But before we do that, let's remove the thumping huge light in the background, which we don't need, which is 4 screws. 1, 2, flip it over, and that might be it. That should be loose. It is. Okay. Bye-bye reflector. Next is the actual light. So the old fluorescent light has little wires either side, which you can either snip or grab a small pair of pliers or tweezers, get hold of them, and one out. And 2 out. So that's the light gone. Right, finally, wait, we've got one more. This needs desoldering a bit like the other side. Okay, so the trick is now, this is quite thick, so fold that back and out of the way and flip the whole thing over. Maybe clear away some of the mess I've already made. And this is probably the trickiest bit of the lot. Let's zoom in a bit. This is the old ribbon cable. This is the ribbon cable that connects the old screen, and we want to get rid of this. Now, we don't just want to rip it off, as some people in the past have suggested. We want to add heat and remove. And the way to do this is to get in underneath it. Now again, this has got adhesive, so try and break the adhesive a bit, and we get our soldering iron and start working our way down. I find it good to actually get in underneath the ribbon as opposed to heating on top. That seems to be working for me at least. Now do this very slowly and carefully, because the one thing you don't want to do is remove pads from the PCB. And also be aware that this is the one bit that is truly not reversible. I think we have all our pads intact. What I want to do now is take some solder wick and do our best to clean the leftover mess up. The next thing I want to do is basically some preparation soldering. There is, I don't know, about 10 of these tiny little pads that we need to solder to. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pre-tin the pins we want. To do that, I'm going to add a liberal amount of flux to the work area. If my flux pen was working. There we go, that's a bit better. And with some solder handy and my magnifying glasses. Right, so we want pad number 9. Number 1 is up here and it counts to however many this way. So count down from 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's see, I've already gone and bridged one. All right, 9. The next one is 15. So 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Right. 16, oh, and 17. That makes that easy. So that is hopefully the worst of the soldering done. Next, let's take this, the cover. We also need to trim out these 2 little divots you will find in here. We should now be right to put the screen in. To fit the screen, you'd normally want to remove this film, but I'm probably going to be back and forth a few times. So we place that kind of there-ish, and no, that way, towards the bottom. And this should snap in over the top in there like that. And those 2 remaining locating lugs should hold that there. And if we flip it over, the screen should be in the right spot. Yes, it is. So before we actually start joining this, there is one more step that I nearly forgot. Here is the power board for the old fluorescent light, and we want to basically disable it. Now you've got a couple of choices. You could desolder the whole thing and remove it, but the very top pin of the board just here, and this little pin here that joins the power board to the PCB, we can simply snip out with a pair of flush cutters so it looks like this. And I'm going to, again, pre-tin all these points down the left-hand side. Except to put the screen in the wrong way. Screen goes that way. Right, that would have made life fun. Next, we're going to go through and attach all our wires to the back of the screen. Right, we are ready to actually solder the 2 halves together. Now, the only change I've made is chatting to Ben, I've swapped out the ground and 5 volts for some marginally thicker stranded wire. And I'm going to be working from right to left for the pads that are along the screen and joining them to the links. So the first one is ground, and ground will go to this little spot just here. The next one we have is RES, or res, and it goes to an annoying tiny little via just here. Right, that seems to be attached. Next is D2, which goes to pad 19. So, where are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right. D0 goes to pad 18. Next is D 3, which goes to 17. I'm sensing a pattern here. Next is D1, which goes to pad 16. Next is A3, which goes to pad 60, which was all the way up here. Make sure I got that right. Yep. A2 goes to pad 37, which I marked up here. A1 goes to pad 15. There is a pad called backlight, which goes to the center pin of this potentiometer here. CL2 goes to pad 9. Right. And 5 volt goes to a pad on the back of the cartridge port just here. Right. That should be everything wired up. So we can test, sort of, if we kind of gingerly just fold this over, and if we plug a game in and carefully kind of, without like shorting stuff out, if we put some power to it, I haven't got any buttons. Right. We have light. Okay, so after much swearing, it's working. This is what I did wrong. For starters, I counted my pins wrong. My pin 60 was out by 1, so I wasn't getting the correct clock signals. The other thing is, I think my potentiometer for the brightness, for the contrast, is faulty, because once I fixed that, I could get sort of an image on the screen, but there was no kind of backlight. So I was talking to Ben, and there's actually a small update. Let me show you. Let me unplug and let me show you. Here we have resistor R9. And as you can see, that purple wire I've tapped to the top of R9. Right. That then leads over to, do you remember that tiny little ribbon cable we removed? It goes to here. Now, the reason he's done that is this. If I turn the whole thing over so we can see it, and I put power back in, the way he was adjusting the brightness originally was kind of a bit clunky because he wanted to implement scan lines. He decided to ditch scan lines because both of us agree that scan lines are terrible. And what this actually does now, by wiring it there, this potentiometer gives proper brightness control, which is very, very nice. So I'm going to put all this back together and we'll have a look at the finished product. Right, now that everything is finally back together, let's take a look at this thing. And that is very nice. It is super sharp. And watch me try and play Pac-Man through the viewfinder, or Ms. Pac-Man through the viewfinder of my camera. But the colors look just amazing. And there's no, obviously being a modern LCD, there's no blur, there's none of that. It's just really nice. I'm incredibly happy with this. So there we go. Now, I probably don't need to tell you that the outcome, at least, is amazing. Much like the screen that Ben did for the Lynx 2, it has absolutely brought new life to this Lynx 1. Obviously, the install is fairly involved. However, on a quick side note, Ben is designing a ribbon cable. It'll still require soldering, but it should make the install significantly easier to what I just had to go through. But all in all, very, very happy. A big thanks to both Ben from BennVenn and to Igor from Atari Gamer for their assistance as I put all this together. And that will pretty much about do it. I'm happy with the outcome. If you like the video, click like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. If you would like to help support the channel, I am now on Patreon, just like these wonderful people just here. And that will do it for now, and I will see you in the next one.